Hi, I'm Blake Lively, and I'm going to be taking the BuzzFeed quiz, which iconic
Hey
Blake Lively
besties, welcome back to my channel. Buckle up because the court just dropped a bombshell and Blake Lively is absolutely reeling. Judge Lyman just issued one of the most scathing, career-altering orders we've seen in this ongoing Hollywood legal saga. And trust me when I say this. What just happened could destroy the foundation of Blake's entire lawsuit. So here's what's going down. This afternoon, the Southern District of New York officially dismissed Jed Wallace from the case entirely. No chance to amend, no second bite at the apple, no quiet procedural fix in the background. He's out, done, gone. The court has ruled that New York simply has no jurisdiction over him, and that single ruling may be the fatal crack that makes the whole case crumble. The language in the judge's order is cutting, cold, direct, and surgical. He didn't just reject Blake's theories. He dismantled the logic her entire lawsuit was built on. And besties, when I say with prejudice, I mean this dismissal isn't a temporary setback. The judge literally said, this court has no power to touch Jed Wallace in any way, shape, or form. Blake can only try to refile in another state, somewhere that actually has jurisdiction, but that means completely rebuilding her entire legal theory from scratch, stripping it of all those elaborate New York connections she's been clinging to. The order shows a deeper problem, too, because the judge isn't just saying wrong place. He's saying wrong case. Now, the reasoning is brutal. Judge Lyman basically said that Blake's entire legal approach amounts to taking defamation, her reputation being damaged, and dressing it up as workplace harassment, retaliation, and invasion of privacy. And under New York law, you cannot do that. You can't take a defamation claim, slap a different label on it, and call it discrimination or retaliation. He specifically said her entire complaint sounds in defamation, meaning what she's really complaining about is the harm to her image, her credibility, her public standing, not her actual employment or workplace. That's a killer line for her legal team because it basically invalidates the heart of her argument. He's saying that she's trying to weaponize workplace law to fight a public relations war. And courts don't play those games. So, in the judge's words, the alleged injuries she described, lost appearances, canceled sponsorships, bad press, are all reputational. Not one of them counts as a real workplace injury under federal law. And if that's true, then it's not retaliation. It's not harassment. It's not discrimination. It's defamation. And besties, this is devastating because Blake's entire lawsuit hinges on this massive smear campaign she keeps referencing. Her claim was that this coordinated PR and social media effort, allegedly led by Jed Wallace, was retaliation for her standing up to the Wayfair team over workplace issues. But Judge Lyman said no, that doesn't fly. A smear campaign affects public perception, not your workplace. It doesn't meet the legal definition of an adverse employment action. And the judge took it even further. He basically said the lawsuit reads like a PR meltdown disguised as legal retaliation. According to the court, all of her alleged harm stems from public relations fallout, not actual job loss or demotion. Every single injury she lists, canceled corporate events, lost brand appearances, the dip in her hair care line sales, all trace back to public image damage, not to anything her employer did to her in a workplace sense. That's why the judge wrote, in essence, this is not a workplace injury. It's a reputation injury. And under New York law, if it sounds like defamation, then it is defamation, no matter how you label it. This ruling also exposes something Blake's team has been trying desperately to hide, that this lawsuit was never really about harassment or retaliation. It was always about the headlines. Remember all those court filings where she said she couldn't attend public events, couldn't host Saturday Night Live, couldn't promote her brand? The judge specifically referenced those as examples of how her claim damages are reputational. She was saying, I couldn't appear in public because of bad press. And the judge replied, then that's not a job injury. That's PR fallout. It's a subtle but legally fatal distinction. And here's where it gets worse. Because now, by defining the core of her claim as defamation, the court is setting up a domino effect that could topple everything else in this case. The remaining defendants, like Wayfair and its executives, can now point to this ruling and say, "Your Honor, the same reasoning applies to us." If the judge already ruled that the so-called retaliation campaign is actually just defamation, then they can argue that none of Blake's workplace claims meet the legal threshold. That's a death sentence for her. Let's talk about how we got here. Blake's lawyers had claimed multiple bases for jurisdiction over Jed Wallace. Conspiracy jurisdiction, long-arm jurisdiction, you name it. They argued that Wallace was part of a broader conspiracy that included New York-based acts, and therefore his conduct could be tied to the state. They even said that because certain online materials were published and accessible in New York, that should count. The judge shot that down completely. He said that's not how jurisdiction works. You can't drag someone from another state into a New York courtroom just because something they said online can be read there. He also said that even if other alleged co-conspirators were in New York, that doesn't automatically mean Wallace was under New York's power. He emphasized free speech concerns, warning that Blake's expansive theory of conspiracy jurisdiction could create chaos, essentially allowing anyone, anywhere, to be sued in New York just for talking about something online. He even gave a hypothetical. Imagine a group of people scattered across the country discussing an issue of public interest online, and one person happens to be in New York. Under Blake's theory, all of them could be sued in New York simply because of that. The judge made it clear he's not opening that door. And this is where the tone of his order gets really telling. You can almost sense the frustration in his words. He's not just rejecting her legal argument. He's calling out the fundamental weakness of the case. He says in so many words that she's trying to turn bad publicity into a workplace discrimination claim. And that's not how the law works. It's almost as if he's saying, this isn't a lawsuit, it's a PR strategy. And because Jed Wallace was the supposed mastermind behind this smear campaign, his removal from the case guts the entire retaliation narrative. Without him, there's no orchestrator. Without an orchestrator, there's no campaign. And without a campaign, there's no retaliation case. It's a domino effect, and the first tile just fell. Now, let's talk about the implications. By dismissing Jed Wallace, Judge Lyman has effectively told Blake's team that New York isn't the place for this fight. If she wants to pursue him, she'll have to go somewhere that actually has jurisdiction, likely Texas, where Wallace is based. But here's the problem. Texas courts have stricter rules about frivolous filings and defamation lawsuits. If Blake refiles there with the same arguments, she could face sanctions or even penalties for abuse of process. In other words, she'd have to completely rewrite the lawsuit from the ground up, cutting out the New York connections and proving that Wallace actually did something actionable. And the judge noted that despite all the discovery Blake's team already conducted, emails, communications, internal documents, they still couldn't show a clear link between Wallace and any unlawful act. The judge literally said she provided evidence and it wasn't good enough. That's devastating. The ruling also exposes how fragile her entire legal narrative really is. Blake's theory was that Wallace and others aided and abetted in retaliation by giving PR advice, helping craft narratives, and amplifying negative content online. The judge dismantled that too. He said, even if they did give advice or strategize, the nature of the injury still matters. What was the harm? Reputation, not employment. So, even if Wallace helped shape publicity, that doesn't make it workplace retaliation. It's a public relations issue. He's saying that Blake's entire argument is focused on how she was embarrassed, not whether she was actually harmed in her job. And legally, that's a fatal flaw. The court cares about tangible employment actions, firing, demotion, pay cuts, workplace discipline, not hurt feelings or negative press. Besties, let's be real. This ruling changes everything. It signals that the judge is viewing this entire case through the lens of free speech, not workplace harassment. That's why he cited hypothetical online activists. He's treating this case as one about public speech and reputation, not discrimination. He's saying you can't just sue people in New York because they said mean things about you online. It's a huge free speech moment in a celebrity context. And you can tell he's thinking about precedent. Because if he let Blake's argument stand, it would open the floodgates for every celebrity to sue out-of-state critics in New York just because their posts were accessible there. That's a First Amendment nightmare, and this judge wasn't having it. So let's unpack what happens next. Blake Lively's remaining claims, especially the FVA retaliation and harassment ones, now hang by a thread. Because the judge has essentially said they sound in defamation, the defense teams for Wayfair and others will absolutely use this in their upcoming motions for summary judgment. Summary judgment is when the court decides that no trial is needed because the facts don't support the legal claims. And this ruling gives them ammunition. They'll say, "Your Honor, you already found that these claims are reputational, not employment-related. So you should dismiss the rest too." And honestly, that argument will be hard for the judge to ignore. He's already written the logic himself. This could end before it ever reaches trial. Now, the timing of this order is also interesting. He dropped it just days before the summary judgment motions are due. That means he wants this reasoning to guide those filings. It's like he's saying, "Here's how I'm viewing this case. Adjust your arguments accordingly." And you can bet the defense attorneys will seize on every single line of this order. The entire case could unravel within weeks. And that's why, besties, you're suddenly seeing Blake's team file these aggressive sanctions motions and public statements. They're trying to control the narrative, distract the media, and spin this as some kind of technical misunderstanding. But it's not. It's a legal implosion. And here's the irony. By trying to turn bad publicity into a legal issue, Blake might have made her publicity even worse. Because now, every outlet can legally say that the court found her claims sound in defamation. That means journalists can write headlines like, "Judge says Lively's case was really about reputation, not harassment," and they're backed by the actual court record. It's not defamation if the judge said it. So this ruling doesn't just damage her case, it damages her brand. Every future motion, every court filing will now carry the shadow. And let's not forget, she built her public persona around being articulate, strong, composed, untouchable. Now, she's the actress who tried to sue over bad PR and got told it wasn't a workplace injury. That's a narrative disaster. What's more, the judge also hinted that her claim about a frivolous lawsuit damaging her reputation was unconvincing. He seemed to imply that her own lawsuit might be the frivolous one. That's harsh. And if this continues to go south, she could even be on the hook for attorney's fees if the court determines that parts of her case were brought in bad faith. Remember, under federal law, if a plaintiff files claims that have no factual or legal basis, the court can sanction them. And if she tries to refile in Texas with the same weak arguments, she might not just lose again. She could face financial penalties. So, let's take a step back, besties, because this is about more than one court ruling. This is about credibility. When the judge says that every harm she's claiming is reputational, not professional, he's basically saying that the lawsuit is a PR stunt dressed as a legal fight. It's an indirect way of saying, you're not a victim of discrimination, you're a victim of bad publicity. That's brutal. And as this order circulates, it's going to shift how the public and Hollywood view this entire scandal. If the case continues to fall apart piece by piece, it won't just hurt Blake legally. It'll crush the moral high ground she's been standing on. And if you think about how strategic Judge Lyman's timing was, dropping this just as both sides are gearing up for summary judgment, it's like he's signaling how he's likely to rule next. It's a roadmap. Every paragraph of this order reads like foreshadowing for a broader dismissal. And the ripple effects will be huge, not just for Blake, but for everyone else involved. Because if her central claim is now legally defined as defamation, not discrimination, then all those co-defendants she accused of aiding and abetting retaliation can use that same shield. The entire retaliation narrative evaporates. So what happens next? Blake has two bad options. She can either try to appeal this ruling, which would be a long shot and could delay everything for months, or she can attempt to refile in a jurisdiction like Texas. But that would require rewriting the whole case from scratch, dropping all the New York-based claims, and proving something entirely new. And even then, she risks sanctions if the court finds she's just recycling the same theory. Either way, it's a lose-lose situation. And let's not forget how much of this lawsuit was tied to her public image. The hair care line, the sponsorships, the media perception. The judge even cited those examples, saying that they directly tied to reputational harm. It's almost poetic because this entire case started as an attempt to protect her brand, and now her brand is what's taking the hit. And the irony? The court has now legally confirmed that what she called harassment and retaliation was, in essence, just a reputational dispute. It's the kind of line that will haunt her legal team in every courtroom from here on out. So besties, if you thought this case was messy before, buckle up. This is just the beginning of the unraveling. The judge's order is more than just a procedural ruling. It's a public statement. It says, I see through this. And that kind of message from a federal judge is devastating for a plaintiff trying to control the narrative. The legal community is already buzzing about this decision, calling it a potential precedent-setting moment for celebrity defamation cases disguised as workplace claims. Because if the rest of the case goes down the same way, it will mark a major shift, courts drawing a clear line between employment law and reputation management. And right now, that line has been drawn straight through Blake Lively's lawsuit. And buckle up, because what unfolded after the judge officially threw out Blake Lively's lawsuit wasn't just another courtroom twist. It was the kind of Hollywood implosion that rewrites reputations overnight and leaves even the most PR-polished star scrambling for cover. The moment that gavel hit, a stunned silence fell in the courtroom. No applause, no murmurs, just the icy echo of the decision that Blake's entire legal team had desperately tried to prevent. Ryan Reynolds, seated in the second row behind her, didn't move. His jaw tightened, his eyes darting toward Blake as if trying to measure how deep the damage went. And yet, what no one expected was the quiet ripple this ruling would send through Hollywood's elite circles. Because this wasn't just about one lawsuit being dismissed. It was about power, truth, and the dangerous myth of invincibility that celebrity couples like Blake and Ryan had built around themselves. Within minutes, the news broke online. Blake Lively's lawsuit thrown out by judge. Shocking ruling changes everything. Twitter exploded, TMZ went live, and insiders from Deadline and Variety were already dissecting every line of the judge's written decision, which bluntly stated there was insufficient evidence to support claims of professional defamation or contractual misconduct. But behind the legal jargon was something far uglier. The realization that Blake's narrative, the one she'd curated for months, had collapsed under its own contradictions. Sources close to the courtroom whispered that even her attorneys had sensed it coming, especially after the cross-examination by Justin Baldoni's counsel shredded her testimony and exposed inconsistencies that no PR spin could fix. And Justin, who had been painted by her camp as manipulative, opportunistic, and controlling, suddenly looked like the man who had been unfairly vilified for months. He didn't celebrate publicly, though. Instead, his quiet statement to the press, I'm grateful for truth and closure, hit harder than any victory speech could. Meanwhile, Selena Gomez, who had distanced herself quietly from Blake after the fallout between their mutual friend Taylor Swift and the Lively Reynolds camp, was spotted liking a cryptic post that read, "Sometimes silence says everything." Fans noticed immediately, interpreting it as a subtle nod to where her loyalties really stood. Inside Blake's circle, chaos reigned. Sources say her team went into lockdown mode. Phones buzzing, statements drafted, NDAs revisited, as they scrambled to contain what was rapidly becoming a PR disaster of historic proportions. Blake herself, according to one insider, was furious, humiliated, and desperate to find someone to blame. Ryan, who has always managed his brand with surgical precision, was said to be visibly shaken, but also strategic, telling close friends that this is a storm we'll weather quietly. But quietly didn't last long. Within 24 hours, major outlets began running retrospectives on the case. How it began, how it spiraled, and why so many people close to the couple warned them not to go to court in the first place. Headlines like Blake Lively's legal gamble backfires and reputation in ruins. The lawsuit that should never have happened trended for days. Even late-night talk shows picked it up, with one host joking, when you sue Hollywood, make sure Hollywood isn't watching you implode. Yet beneath the public humiliation, there was a deeper story unfolding, one about the culture of control, image management, and quiet manipulation that had fueled this entire drama from the beginning. Blake had built a brand on being America's golden girl, polished, witty, untouchable. But insiders now whispered that behind the scenes, she was one of Hollywood's most calculating image architects, determined to protect her narrative at all costs. And when that narrative cracked, it exposed everything she'd fought to hide: the rivalry with co-stars, the unspoken tension with studio executives, the fragile alliance with Ryan that was less romantic partnership and more brand strategy. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni, the man at the center of her lawsuit, was experiencing a strange redemption arc. After months of being cast as the villain, he suddenly became a symbol of resilience, the man who refused to be destroyed by Hollywood's PR machinery. His interviews were calm, measured, almost spiritual, emphasizing forgiveness and accountability rather than revenge. That tone struck a nerve with audiences, especially as people contrasted it with Blake's silence. For the first time in her career, she had no script to follow. Every move she made, every photo, every quote was dissected, mocked, and analyzed. Paparazzi captured her leaving a private Beverly Hills office looking visibly distraught, and tabloids plastered the image everywhere with captions like, "The Fall of a Hollywood Queen." Ryan, ever the strategist, began shifting attention to his own projects, attending events solo, promoting his gin company, and leaning into humor online, all while avoiding direct questions about his wife's case. Fans noticed. The comments under his posts were filled with divided opinions. Some accused him of abandoning Blake. Others praised him for staying out of the drama. In Hollywood, silence could be the loudest statement of all, and his silence was deafening. Meanwhile, Selena Gomez became an unexpected voice of reason in the narrative. During an interview promoting her documentary work, she was asked about truth in celebrity culture, and her response, though diplomatic, was unmistakably pointed. "I think sometimes people forget that honesty isn't a PR strategy. It's a choice." The clip went viral within hours, and though she never mentioned Blake by name, everyone knew what she meant. Industry insiders say that Blake's management has been working behind the scenes to pivot, exploring charity partnerships, rebranding campaigns, even a potential tell-all sit-down interview to reclaim her story. But sources close to the matter say that top networks are hesitant. Producers don't want to touch the controversy until the public sentiment softens, and that could take months or even years. Hollywood is brutal like that. It builds idols fast, but it erases them even faster when the illusion breaks. In private, Blake has reportedly told friends that she feels betrayed by everyone, by Justin, by the system, even by Ryan, who she feels didn't defend her publicly when it mattered. But according to multiple insiders, Ryan's silence was strategic. He's focused on protecting his own brand, knowing that any public defense could tie him to her downfall. Their marriage, once the envy of Hollywood, is now under quiet scrutiny, not for romance gossip, but for how two PR masterminds navigate a shared crisis. And the irony? The same industry that once adored their perfect couple energy now sees them as case studies in overcuration and the dangers of believing your own myth. As the weeks passed, the narrative only deepened. Anonymous Hollywood sources began leaking details from behind closed doors about heated fights between Blake and her team, about legal bills piling up, about A-list friends quietly unfollowing her to protect their image. And yet, amid all the chaos, there's something tragically human about it all. The story of a woman who built an empire of perfection and watched it crumble in real time. Blake Lively, once the face of grace and glamour, now finds herself confronting the one thing Hollywood hates most: vulnerability. But maybe, just maybe, that's where her real story begins. Because if she can rise from this, not through spin or strategy, but through raw truth, it might be the one plot twist no one saw coming. For now, though, Hollywood waits. The court has spoken, the world has judged, and the cameras are still rolling, capturing not a victory, but a reckoning. And in a town built on illusion, sometimes the most shocking verdict isn't handed down by a judge, it's delivered by the mirror.